building a bit on top of the same thing, right? So we talked about these complex environments, and we know Kubernetes is a really complex environment with a lot of moving parts and things to sort of measure and look after. It quickly gets overwhelming. In your view, what are some of the sort of key metrics that you think in a production Kubernetes cluster that users should observe, and how?
So it's really useful to look sometimes at things from two perspectives. The first perspective is something wrong? And when you're asking if something is wrong, it's really useful to look at stuff in terms of SLAs and SLOs, service level objectives, and to look at not like, is internally like different stuff happening? Because maybe internally different weird stuff is happening, but nothing is wrong. A good example is, let's say you have a pod that's continually crashing, but Kubernetes is self-healing. It brings that pod back up. Maybe there's no impact from that. So you want to look at the high level picture of it. Like, is my customer getting what the customer expects? I have this service, customers can use it. And let's say I'm Uber and they can do food deliveries, right? So like, did the number of food deliveries remain constant in the past few minutes, or did it suddenly like drop? Now there are no more food deliveries in the entire world. Well, then something's wrong. So in terms of problem identification, it's very useful sometimes to look at that external perspective where people use SLOs, service level objectives, and using that and like related stuff, you can tell when something is wrong. But then once you know something is wrong, to troubleshoot that and to really observe that and to understand why it's happening, then sometimes you need a different set of tools that can let you drill down and understand why stuff is happening.
Yeah, thanks. So if I try to sort of break it down a bit, so what you're really trying to refer to here is that you have to contextualize sort of the environment and the things that you are running in and see what really matters the most. So one sort of metric being observed at one place might not be sufficient in another contextualized environment.
100%. I mean, we're big believers in this because of what we do. And like, I did a lot of crazy things. Like I quit my job and like worked without a salary for a few months. And like, you do all sorts of crazy things, like, because I believe in that sentence you just stated, right? Like ultimately the context is really important. So I'm like a huge believer in that. Also in the actions I've taken in my personal life and doing a startup around that. But the problem is when something goes wrong, the immediate piece of data that you're looking at is often not sufficient to understand why it went wrong. And there, the contextualization, taking something that went wrong, then adding on the context for why it went wrong is really important. If again, like you want to get your business back up and running, like you always have to remember at the end of the day, like you have that API that someone is calling to do food deliveries. And like when that's down, well, like no one in the city of Seattle is getting food deliveries with Uber anymore, or like 10% of users aren't getting them and it's failing on that. So to get that back up and running as fast as possible, then you have to contextualize.